What's up, everyone? Beast Mode back here with another video. So, unfortunately, over the past 2 weeks, I've been extremely busy just trying to get situated and schedule back in line. But I'm back here again and will be routinely posting videos like I do, typically once to twice a week. So today I wanted to finish up the mini series that we had here, covering the what I think are the 4 top decks of the format. If you look at tournament success and even War League success, you would see that the Blackwing deck, Vayu Turbo deck, the Hero Beat deck, Diva Hero Beat, and Hero Frogs are probably the 4 dominant decks in War League, but more so in tournament play. These 4 decks are just running around and tearing things up. So this is the last deck to cover here. This Hero Frog deck, I despise playing frogs. I just don't particularly care for the style of the deck. I feel that this deck is pretty uninteractive with your opponent a lot of the time. It just does things that are completely unfair. Dupe Lock is unfair. It's something that some decks can't even deal with that well. The whole mechanic of getting a +1 every single turn with little to no work, just kind of, it's almost like a cheat. You get a +1 with the frog after like turn 1, and then you have +1 with the monarchs. And this is Alex Demand's Hero Frog list from I don't know what tournament. There's been so many of them as of late, but I'm pretty sure it's similar to Fraser Smith's Hero Frog deck that has been very much refined. I think at this point the build is probably the build. Of course, you can cut an enemy controller here or a Regeki break and switch things up in that sense. But I think the monster lineup is probably the most optimal it has been in quite some time. This deck here, so out of the 4 decks that we've discussed, Blackwings obviously flow very well. Every card works together well. I found that Vayu Turbo also feels very similar to that, despite the fact that those cards are all different types and all that. Like they're not meant to go together at all, but the way the deck is built and the way they mill and the deck feels very strong and it flows well. Then you have Diva Hero Beat, which runs into some of the problems that this deck does, where you need water, you need heroes, and you need the Miracle Fusion. And obviously it has even more problems with the Diva Hero Beat, where the main strength of the deck is probably Gemini Spark, and it requires you to play 3 Alias, which are just 1900 beaters. So this deck here is, in my opinion, far more consistent in terms of the whole Miracle Absolute Zero package than the Diva Hero Beat, just because naturally you're playing the waters, as in the Substitute and the Swap Frog. So the water part of the whole Miracle Fusion is pretty much not relevant. Now, the hero package can be, just because there's so little heroes here. You do have the Rhoda and the E-Call. And this is probably, besides Diva Hero, this is probably the best Miracle Fusion deck, I would think, just because of the fact that Miracle Fusion is pretty consistent, and Absolute Zero gets just huge in this deck because of all the water monsters. You can hide behind a Dupe Lock and a Treeborn, and it gains 1500 attack. It's a powerhouse in this deck. So again, I have played 0 games with this deck, and these matches here that I have are not really to showcase how well I play the deck, because I'm not playing it well. I think that this deck actually, after playing it, I used to think that it was pretty mindless, and earlier decks of the frog decks of the format were pretty mindless. They played far more monarchs, and you really just did the whole Treeborn monarch every turn. It didn't require much thought. Now the deck is becoming a little bit more combo oriented, and with the Miracle Fusion and the enemy controllers and how you play the deck, it does require some thought. You can get away playing this deck like I did, with just simply slamming cards and not really putting much thought in. It is probably the best game 1 deck of the format. That could be you can argue that with like Dragon Turbo, but because this deck doesn't really care what your opponent's doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing on their side of the board for the most part, game 1, unless it's something cheap like Chain Burn or something like that. But this deck doesn't, because it doesn't matter. It's going to do what it's going to do every turn regardless. It's going to sit behind Dupe Lock waiting to draw cards. It's going to plus off enemy controllers and steal your monsters. It's going to drop monarchs and bounce them back with Swap Frog. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, what your opponent's doing with this deck game 1. Now, come game 2 and 3, this deck has a little bit of a problem, because there are many cards that can be sideboarded in to try to hit this deck. Obviously, pulling the rugs, which has been less effective now that the monarchs have been cut down. And also, a lot of people are siding in these Vanity Fiends to try to make those pulling the rugs more dead. So you can take out a few monarch, and boom, that takes care of that problem. I think Fraser Smith has really been tailoring the sideboard depending on the events he goes to. And like I said, I think most of the innovation is probably going to come from this deck right here with the sideboard. Now that they're starting to put more traps in, because they know that MST heavy and a lot of your dust tornadoes in the main board of certain decks are coming out because they're just not effective against this deck. So now you can kind of do the whole reverse sideboard in and then put in some torrentials and mirror force. This card catches a lot of people off guard, especially when you don't expect them to flip a torrential when you're trying to play against a frog deck, because typically how you beat the frog deck is by playing very aggressive, which zombies can do. Zombies can explode out of nowhere and try to win in one turn. The problem is if they have Battle Fader or a key piece of interruption, maybe an enemy controller, then the whole combo is one and done, and then all it takes is one Monarch to break a board. You tribute for the Monarch, send back one of the synchros, run over Brio, and that's it for the zombie player pretty much. So the deck here flows pretty well for the most part. You still run into some brick situations with Miracle Fusions and not having a hero, but I feel it is a lot better than a Diva Hero Beat. This deck right here is just unbelievable going first. It's almost, if you go first game one, you pretty much win the game, and then you get to go first game three, which is key. So anyway, let's hop into a couple of matches here. And again, I'm not an expert when it comes to this deck. I'm sure you can find way better high-level gameplay. You watch Fraser Smith's channel, or watch some of the matches in War League. There are far better players playing this deck, but I do think you can get away with just simple slamming and win some games with it. So let's hop in here and just watch. I don't know if I went first or second. We'll find out really quick. And it looks like our opponent's actually on Diva Hero, which I actually really like this deck. I was able to top one of the Deck Devastators with it. I went like 7 or 8-1 with it. I don't really remember, but Deck Devastation can be a card that really hurts this deck, as you can see. Okay. But the problem with this deck is also if you don't draw like pretty bananas, it's hard to you don't really have that mid-range game with this deck. It's really explosive, but you have to have a pretty decent hand to do that. So let's just see here. And again, I probably don't sequence half the stuff right. I think I could probably 1-for-1 here first, and then do like the whole. I could actually dupe log here, I believe. But I don't know. Again, I'm sure you can have far more optimal plays, and there are definitely some plays that you have to think about with this deck. It is not as simple as it used to be when you played 8 Monarchs. Okay, the whole goal was to just sack for Monarch after Monarch, and you had the occasional absolute zero that came down, but this requires a little bit more thinking. I probably here, I don't know if I should search for, probably should search for Ocean if I have plans to make dupe lock. That way I can kind of like keep bouncing Stratos or something. But our opponent drew pretty dead, so I don't really think any of this matters. And this card right here is dead against us. Like that's the problem, and that's why this deck is so good game one, because you naturally have MST, Heavy Storm. Some decks are main decking 1 or 2 Dust Tornadoes, and those cards are all dead against a Frog deck for the most part, because everything's chainable unless you happen to hit something in the end phase. So like that's one dead card. Obviously Malicious is dead. Dark Arm is dead right now. Deck Devi isn't doing anything, although they could summon Diva and make like Android, or I mean Catastor, and then Deck Devi, which I'm not sure why they don't do that. Well, they're probably gonna do that now that they see the board, but which wouldn't even hurt us at this point. It just would hit a couple cards, and we still have the bigger monsters here. So they actually drew double Mally. I don't know if you saw that, but they drew double Mally there, and they concede, but they could have made Catastor and set up a Deck Devi play. I'm not sure how far I would have got them. I would have hit a couple cards out of my hand, but we have to remember that Swap Frogs in the graveyard are just kind of there because they usually often get returned back to your hand again with the dupe lock of the dupe effect. So you just return the Swap Frogs back. So Deck Devi is one of those cards that can really cripple this deck, or it doesn't really hit anything. So I don't draw the best hand here, but Vandy's Fiend, like the hand, they didn't draw well, so this is not the greatest example of a game here, but I just want to show you why. So Vandy's Fiend is often a card that you side deck in against frogs because you think that it can, or Fossil Dyna, for example, because it can really stop the absolute zero play with the Miracle Fusion, the Treeborn. But what's funny is that you actually side deck triple Vandy Fiend yourself in this deck, because you can turn this off anytime you want. You can either tribute it for a Monarch, you can summon Swap Frog and return it back to your hand, and then do absolute zero, make absolute zero plays with the Miracle Fusions. So this card is like really, really good, and it's even better in this deck because this deck can control really when they want to turn it on and off. And as you can see, their whole hand is completely dead again, and this game is not going to end well. I don't even know if I'm really supposed to set that. Maybe, I'm not sure. I guess you're really not supposed to set anything, but they draw and they scoop. So that's Diva Hero at its finest there, when you just draw those hands that are unplayable. obviously you can't play. So this doesn't showcase a deck per se, but it does showcase some of the tricks you can do with the sideboard with the Vanity Fiend, because this whole hand is dead. Game one, they could have decked Evitas, but it would have hit like a Swap Frog and an Eva Hero Prodigy there. Doesn't do anything. So this here is a real match. We have a match against a Amaryllis Burn deck. I'm sure you're going to see some things I could do far differently, but I just want to showcase some of the plays with the deck. So here's some of the problems here. We're running into, we have a bunch of Miracle Fusions, but no heroes. And that's going to kind of happen with any deck that plays Miracle Fusion for the most part, because of the fact that it requires specifically a hero and a water. So all we need is one hero, and this whole hand is like unbelievable. Or a Monarch, really. So, of course, playing against Titanium, that one card really hurts this deck because it stops all the Monarch plays. But it used to hurt the deck a lot more when there was more Monarchs. But now that we have the Absolute Zero package, and Absolute Zero just destroys the Amaryllis, the Titanium board, rather. They bring out one or two of these, and then you can just crash an Absolute Zero into it. So we drop Gores early. And right now, we're drawing pretty dead. I do have the Wing Blast. So I actually special the Swap Frog here. I don't even know why I do that. I don't need to do that. Oh, I want to get rid of the Treeborn Frog. But I don't think I need to do that. And I can bounce the Gores back to my hand. So I didn't actually have to even special that. But we go put the other Treeborn in the graveyard. So once you know that there's a Gores, it's very easy to play around. So they obviously have a powerhouse here. This is like very difficult. I don't know. They drew the second Titanium, I'm guessing. So we're drawing Dust Shoots here that are dead. We set Dupe Frog. We need a hero bad. If we draw a hero, we can literally out this entire board with one Absolute Zero, and we are just not getting there. We're at 3,400. And now this is why I want to showcase this game. This is one of the examples of the deck bricking, okay? Dead, 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 dead. This card's useless at this point in time. We've already sent double Treeborn Frog, and Gores they know about. So, but if one of these cards was a hero, we win the game. Like all it takes is one hero, and there's pretty much no way we lose this game. We're going to out this entire board. Then the Absolute Zero goes to the graveyard, and then every Miracle Fusion's live after that. So, I understand that this game is looking like it's going to be a loss, but just see how different this game would be, or think how different it would be if we had literally one hero, and you could out entire board with double Titanium with tokens on the board, because like Absolute Zero just destroys it all. So, and I drew the Ocean the turn too late, so I actually die with all those attacks. So we're going to move on to game 2. And I do believe I sideboard, or I think I sideboard. Yes, I do. I put in some Vanity's Fiend against this. So thinking about it now, I don't know if this is the best play, because we know they play Lone Fire into Titanium, and that just runs it over. But I don't know. What good is an Alias going to do in this deck? It's not like we have Sparks or anything like that. So maybe we should have I think we probably just substitute first and then put Treeborn in the graveyard and have Swap in our hand. And then we could just enemy controller, and maybe they sacrifice. So definitely not right summoning Alias there, looking at this now. But again, that's just because I don't play the deck. And I said, if you watch some of the better or the best Frog players, there's a few. If you watch them play, they don't make mistakes with this deck, and they play at a much higher level than this. Is just me slamming cards. They actually have Comedian in, and it actually works. That's pretty cool. So we just Dupe Block now, and they actually Torrential, because they can't even out it. And that's another reason why this deck is like completely unfair, because it has this Dupe Block, and some decks can't out the lock at all. Like, I don't even know a way that this deck really does it, other than having like a Wing Blast or specifically the Torrential. So yeah, they could have waited and maybe held the Torrential until I summon something and like Swap Frog and use the effect, so they can make the dupe miss timing. But yeah, this is another reason why this deck is kind of ridiculous, because if you draw a bad hand, you can hope to sit behind Dupe Block and just draw and draw and draw until you can start drawing it out. Maybe you need a hero. So anyway, we get Dupe Block, or Torrential rather. What do I take back? I guess I could have grabbed one from the deck too, right? Yeah. So anyway, we already have all the Swap Frogs, so it doesn't really matter. We could have grabbed back maybe a Treeborn, but we don't really want to do that. I actually make a dumb mistake here. I didn't realize I should read this effect. This card cannot control. This card cannot switch. So that's interesting. So I actually didn't need to lose a Treeborn there then because I couldn't technically take it, but whatever. So they summon into this. That was not smart on their part. So that was not very clean. I should read that card. If you're just not familiar with it, it's not something you see commonly. But at this point, Miracle Fusion's live because we have the hero in our hand, so we can always activate it. And this deck is not that great at times, top decking, because you can just be drawing a bunch of these. So even despite our mistake here, we are in pretty good control. This card's really, if your opponent controls a monster, you can tribute this for 1 tribute. So this card has trample. It's pretty good. Just another name. That's why it's in the deck. So we get some good piercing damage there, and they take that. And they probably should have attacked first, but maybe they were worried about Gores. I don't know. And well, they wanted to send us to the graveyard so they can take another 800 and then bring it back. That makes sense. So at this point, it's almost impossible we're going to lose this game. We have a plus like 4 on them for not really doing a whole lot of anything, and we minused ourselves by trying to enemy controller a Botanical Lion, and so that's game. So now we're going to go to game 3. We made the big absolute 0 push there, and we had pretty much everything we needed. So this hand here is pretty good. We have heroes, we have the swap frog, so Miracle Fusion's pretty live, and you see how easy it is when you draw. When you see a hero, it's pretty much Miracle Fusion's always live because the deck plays so many frogs. Again, I'm not entirely sure what the best play is. Is it summon Stratos first or is it summon swap frog first? I'm sure somebody can comment and let me know if you should always be summoning swap frog first. I don't know. Maybe to thin the deck, that's probably the right play. So we get card destruction here, and our hand is lackluster now. I think it was better before. Actually, we still have Miracle Fusion, so it doesn't really matter. We're going to take 1,000, and they're going to start doing the burn. Triple Battle Fader. I guess I'm not dying anytime soon. So we just go Miracle Fusion, and this is actually pumped up. And I learned this little trick here. Summon the Junk Synchron, and then you can just like keep looping it with the Swap Frog because it bounces back for cost. I hope I did that right, but I believe I did. And as you can see, like, look how much advantage we have. And we're just in such a dominant position. They have to use so many cards to out this board. Like, Absolute Zero always trades favorably, especially in this situation. We have Regeki Break because we're reading that that's a Raikou. And we were right. And we have 3 Battle Faders, so we might as well use them. And at this point, we just have so much. This Absolute Zero is what? Like 4,000 attack now. And we can switch the Treeborn to attack and run this over and do 4 or 5, like 6,000 damage. So anyway, I'm sure I did not play the deck the best. Let's look at the deck list again. I know I made a couple mistakes, especially with the Botanical Lion and whatever. You can't take control of that, so make sure you guys know that because I learned that that day. And again, this is definitely a very, very strong deck. The next... I think at this point, it's pretty clear that these 4 decks are probably the best decks of the format right now, and it's always changing. So I will be coming, moving forward with a new series. I'll have to think about it, and maybe we'll cover some other decks, but I just wanted to kind of wrap this up. So I do plan on having a BCS this weekend, Saturday evening. It's a good weekend to have one. The BCS Championship should take place either the end of October, maybe early November. I'm going to try to do it around the other premier tournaments. I always try to schedule the BCS around those bigger tournaments, not to take anything away from them, and really to give you guys a place to maybe practice some of the decks that you want to play. So with that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.